Hello, it's Mrs. Wallace. How are you? So happy birthday. I think yesterday may have been your birthday. I just want to do this quick video on the Haitian Revolution. It's actually a very complicated topic, so I'm going to do the best I can to hit some of the really big takeaways, and then where there's some detail, just kind of note it. So one thing to know is that there's a series of revolutions that happen. Sometimes they're referred to as the Atlantic revolutions because we're looking on both sides of the Atlantic Ocean. The American Revolution, the French Revolution, the Haitian Revolution is kind of the third of these revolutions, and it's very connected to the French Revolution, which is happening simultaneously. And it's also inspired by some of what the Enlightenment is about, and also what inspired the American Revolution. And so, the Haitian Revolution is like part of a series of revolutions, and that's important to know. We refer to Haiti before its independence as Saint-Domingue. It's actually before that Hispaniola. So the island of Hispaniola, which in our modern day is Haiti and Dominican Republic. They actually share an island. Haiti at the time, or Saint-Domingue rather, was a French colony, and Santo Domingo was a Spanish colony. Okay, so ultimately there is a sense of the Caribbean being part of like mercantile economies from other countries like France and like Spain and England. The Caribbean is like sugar colonies, and this story of Saint-Domingue becomes very connected to that. Okay, so just kind of note that. It was a French colony since the 1600s. A couple of things about the demographics, right? Saint-Domingue has about 500,000 people who are largely African or African American slaves. This is the majority of the population. There are a few other groups that have small numbers of people, but the majority of the people are migrated forcefully from Africa. And this is generally to work on sugar and coffee plantations, because these are large scale plantations, sometimes with absent landlords who might be back in France. You get a great deal of violence. So this is a group of enslaved persons who are mistreated in a very, very significant way. But you also have other groups on the island, and it's important to recognize these other groups. As we noted, I think I talked to you a little bit yesterday, you have the Grand Blancs. The Grand Blancs, these are rich white planters who are largely French Europeans who are overseeing some of the economic activity that's happening on the sugar and the coffee plantation. You also have poor whites, some of whom may have arrived in Saint-Domingue as indentured servants or artisans, people who are looking for a renewed start, maybe looking to get rich, and people who have different roles in the plantation but are not enslaved. Both of these groups of people who are white or considered European and French generally are, have political rights. Of course, the Petite Blancs are very, resentful that the Grand Blancs have a great deal more economic power. The gens de couleur, or literally the free people of color, these may be mixed race individuals, or maybe free Africans who are at one time enslaved. So it's a very varied group, very diverse group in a lot of ways. People were always being forced to migrate, so the slave trade was continuing, and so you end up with kind of a great deal of people, because the mortality rate was so high in this particular, in sugar colonies, the mortality rate tended to be really high. So you have a lot of replacement of people who die. So, the population grows, but primarily from forced migration, not from, having children and, growing in that way, which is different than, say, North America. You also have this enslaved population, and so certainly a variety of different groups of people. One person to look out for will be Toussaint Louverture. So we'll see in 1791 the slaves rise in a massive revolt that takes on a great deal of Haiti. Toussaint Louverture becomes the leader of a slave uprising. We're also going to see a lot of activity from outside or external societies, especially Spain and England. France is also going to be militarily participating, with the colonists, and that's what makes this topic so complicated. Is we get a lot of European involvement, and we also do get a civil war. Toussaint Louverture and his group of enslaved persons as they pursue their freedom. There's also other groups of free people of color who rise, and there's like political power civil wars that take place in this revolution. So from 1802 to 1804, you're going to see a movement for independence. Initially, this is a movement against slavery, and even the initial slave revolution in 1791 wasn't really geared to end slavery. It was to enable enslaved persons to have better treatment, so greater human rights essentially for people who were enslaved. In time, it becomes a call for an end to slavery. And then in time, this becomes a call to actually declare independence from France. So some of this evolves over the course of the revolution. So even though it starts in like the early 1790s, doesn't really end till 1804, okay? If you look at the map again, we can kind of see the, kind of where modern day Haiti is. And in 1804, France will grant Haiti its independence. It becomes known as the country of Haiti at that time. It is a republic. However, like you will see with the Mexican War of Independence, there's a great deal of political unrest that continues after independence because this like civil war issue and factions within the society that are fighting over political power is a continuation even after independence, okay? So, we talked in class about developing a flow chart that includes a timeline of events, causes and effects, and this type of outline can sometimes help you while you're reading. So you're reading about this very complicated event and you're trying to map it. One way to do that is to use chronology so you can kind of put a detailed timeline together. The other thing you can do as you look at a timeline is start thinking about particular causes and effects, maybe not for every part of the timeline, but some things that are important. And it helps you think about, causation and effects, and also how things change and evolve, which is what happens during the Haitian Revolution. So this is where we get into some of my notes, and I can be a little more specific here. In the middle, we see the timeline, and on the left and the right, you see causes and effects. And I tried to keep this kind of so it makes some sense. Some context for us in before the revolution. So this is like totally before the revolution. 1697 is when the island is annexed by the French. So the French get a hold of Saint-Domingue in 1697. By 1780, which is not quite 100 years later, the French have really increased the trade and the economic activity. So what's been happening in those years, those almost 100 years? France has been building, sugar plantations, and we've seen a massive increase in Europe for the demand for sugar, coffee, and other goods. And it's this demand that's driving a lot of the growth and the profit-making sugar plantations. So, some of the things that are happening in the timeline are really about the increase in sugar economic activity. And where's that coming from? Increased demand. And because this, island is annexed and becomes a colony of France, France is going to use it 100% to gain profits, basically, to enable France to be richer. That's the whole essence of mercantilism. The other thing that we can see happening is that there are very few rights for free people of color in a political sense. And that actually gets less in the middle of the 1700s. The reading that we read, which was the reading I gave you yesterday, talks about mid-century, the black codes, the Code de Noir, are actually changed to take away some rights for free people of color. So that has an effect, and so does the increase in demand. Some of the effects that we start to see is the Grand Blancs, who are now growing in wealth, want free trade and local control. This is a group that's in Saint-Domingue, but they are pursuing sugar activity for the benefit of France, and they want to be able to have greater free trade. They'd like to trade with England and Spain and other countries. The Petit Blancs end up wanting more political and economic power, especially economic power. They want essentially what the Grand Blancs have. The free people of color, okay, so this gens de couleur, they really want political equality. Quite a few of the free people of color have a great deal of economic advantage. Some of them actually own sugar plantations. Some of the mixed race people are essentially wealthy and have a significant status in terms of wealth and have a lot more status. They don't see themselves, in other words, as the same as enslaved persons, but they are in a very big way wanting to maintain the social order in terms of slavery. So they have slaves, want to keep slaves, but they also want greater political rights. They're not considered citizens, and this is because of the black codes that exist from France. And enslaved persons are looking for better conditions, right? They're looking ultimately to get out of slavery. The next part of the timeline, planters send delegates to get local control. So, what's going to happen if you look at the causes? We see in 1788, we see the Estates General called by Louis the 16th. There is a giant meeting, of the monarch to try to figure out how to pay the bills of the American Revolution. And there's a petition at the Estates General for the rights of free people of color. And in this same time, planters, rich white planters, had sent delegates to the Estates General. They do get seated, and there will be tension between those delegates and the Society of Free Blacks. So in France, at the Estates General, there are people who are kind of, seeking better or worse rights for free people of color in the colonies. France also has other colonies, so part of this discussion applies not only to Saint-Domingue, but other peoples as well. In 1789, poor whites riot because they are seeing themselves in the storming of the Bastille and some of what's happening in the French Revolution. So poor whites start to riot. So far, before the revolution even really begins, we have poor whites rioting and free people of color try to revolt. And there's a big crackdown. Rich white planters make a council of their own in Saint-Domingue. They exclude free people of color and poor whites. So the rich white planters are kind of placing themselves on a political, space that's like them alone. And free people of color are trying to, go against that, and they're not successful. In 1791, the French government offers free people of color equality as citizens, but it's actually denied by the rich white planters. So what is happening in France isn't the same as what's happening at home. So we get kind of this free people of color revolt. Some of this is connected to the Enlightenment. Some of this is connected to the policies that are shifting and the availability of potential equality because it's being discussed in France. There's also in 1791, something that catches like everybody off guard. In August of 1791, slaves in the north, where most of the sugar plantations are revolt. This is a planned revolt. There's a great deal of communication between the people who are enslaved, and there's a great deal of pent-up rage, maybe a disarray of free people, maybe because free people were protesting, the slaves are like, come on, we should also protest. So there's a variety of different factors. Some historians link this to the connection of religion, like voodoo, which is kind of like uniquely connected to the Caribbean, and maybe there is some other reasons too, but slaves revolt. This scale of this revolt dominates the Haitian Revolution, and it's also a violent revolt. There'll be a killing of white planters, destruction of coffee plantations, and the slave revolt actually grows, okay? And ultimately, basically, there is a quite a bit of challenge to this. Free people of color by 1791 will also revolt, but in a different geographic area, central and southern region. And we actually are going to get some participation from other European countries who start to push against the French Revolution. It's too radical. This would include Spain and this would include Britain. By 1793, the French have sent an army to Haiti to try to resolve the tensions. I'll stop.